Hi, everyone. I'm Paul with MadCap Software. Today, I'm going to talk about Zendesk integration with Flare so that you can take your topics and your content and push them up to your Zendesk account. Now, before we even get into Flare and start putting all of this together, there are some things you should know right up front, some best practices, some possible gotchas, things to watch out for. First thing I want to mention is if you're going to be publishing from Flare up to Zendesk, you need to be set as either an administrator or a team leader up on Zendesk. So make sure you got that set. Second thing is Flare has lots of output formats that you can choose from, but if you're going to be publishing to Zendesk, you have two choices. One is clean XHTML. You can create a target with that, or you can create an HTML5 target as long as it's skinless. So you go into the target and you set the skin as none. And that also means that you're not going to be using skin components. And those are things that are used for features such as topic toolbars, search bars, things like that. Also, you want to create your content so that think of collections of content. Your project is collections of content, maybe one big collection, maybe multiple collections, whatever you're planning to push up to Zendesk. And you want to have their three main files that are used for this. One is a target file, one's a destination file, one's a TOC file. And you want to have only one of those for each collection of content. So for example, you're going to see as this video goes on, I am going to show you myself publishing a Flare project, a target in a Flare project that contains information about the city of Austin, Texas. Just wrote about the city of Austin, and I want to push that up to Zendesk. Now, in the same project, I could write about lots of cities, San Diego, London, Paris, Tokyo, and I could consider each one of those, each one of those cities a separate collection of content and publishing them to Zendesk separately. If I did that, each city I would want to have a separate target, destination file, and TOC. If I considered all of that one big collection of content, yeah, okay, then one target, one destination file, one TOC for all of that. Just depends on how you want to be organizing your content and pushing it up to Zendesk. Search is another thing. You're used to search in Flare when you generate output, but when you're publishing up to Zendesk, you're not going to be using Flare's search engines. You're going to be using the search that is up on Zendesk. Okay, output, the direction that things are going. That is another thing. We are moving from Flare up to Zendesk. So it's Flare output up to Zendesk. A lot of people ask us, hey, do you go the other way? Are you importing? Do you import from Zendesk into Flare? No, not right now. So what this means is when you publish your content from Flare up to Zendesk, you then don't want to go into Zendesk and start editing the files that were created, the things that were created as a result of that. The topics become articles up in Zendesk, and you don't want to go start editing those. If Flare creates categories and sections as a result of your publishing, you don't want to go edit those, because later on, when you publish again from Flare to Zendesk, it's just going to overwrite your changes. You don't want to do that. So unless you're absolutely sure that forever and ever, amen, you're done with publishing, don't touch those things up in Zendesk. All right. Another thing is attachment file size. You can have things like images and videos maybe that are being published. Well, just keep in mind that you are limited to a file size of 20 megabytes per file attachment. And the last thing that I want to bring up is brands. Zendesk supports brands. And Flare also supports that. So if you do have brands set, then you can connect from Flare to those brands. In fact, in a bit, when I start taking you through this process, you're going to see that I'm actually I'm going to be connecting to a brand, not to my main subdomain. So those are some things just to keep in mind right up front. It's going to make things a lot easier for you if you know about those. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to jump in, get into Flare, and start doing all of this. All right, let's start putting all of this together. So the first thing that you need to do is make sure that you have MadCap Connect for Zendesk installed. This usually happens when you are first installing Flare. You get that exe file and you double click it and you open up the wizard and you go through it. Well, the first page of that wizard, there are a couple of options. One's default and the other is custom. Some people just select default and just go all the way through. Well, custom, if you select that, now you have an option to install MadCap Connect for Zendesk. And if you're thinking, well, I already have Flare installed, I don't know whether I did this or not, that's okay. There's an easy way to see. So let me show you what you would do. So just open up your control panel in Windows, and you can see these are all of my applications, and I've got Flare 2021 installed here, and I just come up here and click uninstall change. And this is going to open up this the first part of this wizard. So it's going to see that, oh, you already have Flare installed. What do you want to do? Modify, repair, uninstall. And I go, well, I just want to modify it, make sure I've got this. Comes up. These are the options you would have seen that first time around if you had selected custom. And you can see MadCap Connect for Zendesk. I already have it selected, so I'm good. I can just back out of here. If you didn't have it selected, click it here, click next, move through the wizard, and you're good. But I'm just going to close it because I already have this set up. So that's it. That's MadCap Connect for Zendesk. That's pretty easy. Now what you want to do is open up your Flare project and take a look at your TOC and consider categories and sections that you might need or you want to be created. So here's a little Flare project I was telling you about. This has to do with the city of Austin, Texas. Again, using my example with other cities, I could put a whole bunch of content for a bunch of other cities in here. But this particular one, I just have so far information about the city of Austin, Texas. And you can see over on the left, the Content Explorer, there's a few folders here and some topics, and there's not too much in here. It's a pretty small project. But what I want to do is go look at my TOC. I've already created one. If I open up the project organizer and come down here to TOCs, you can see I've got 3 TOCs in here. One's called online TOC. Maybe this is my main one for online, and maybe I want to use this, say, for a big help system that I'm going to be creating from this project. Second one, print TOC. I want to create a PDF, and so I want to associate that with that TOC. Well, the third one is one that I created already. I named it Zendesk-Austin. You can name it whatever you want, but that just gives me a clue. Oh, what's this about? This is just the content that I want to take from this project and push up to Zendesk. This is my collection of content. So I'm going to open this up, my little TOC, and again, it's not too much in here. So the first thing that I would do is think about what do I want as an end result up on Zendesk? I always think about the end result and work backwards. So I'm thinking, all right, I've got actually a couple of categories up on Zendesk. Let's go look at my Zendesk account here. So here it is. And I've got a couple of categories already set. I've got San Diego and Austin. And within each one of these, I've got a section in there. And I'm thinking, okay, I don't want to put this stuff in my San Diego category. I do want to put it in the Austin category. So I know that much. So let's go back here. Think, okay, I want to put this stuff in there. And what about the number of levels? Because I've already got my category, so these are going to become sections and maybe subsections, and I got articles in there. But the thing about Zendesk is you don't get that many levels deep. You got categories and sections, and depending on your account, subsections, and you get articles in there, but there's a limit. But with Flare, I've got a few levels in here, but I could go, 20, 30, 40, there's endless. I could go so many levels deep if I wanted to. It's not good to go too many levels, but I could. So what happens is if I then publish this up to Zendesk, some of these, depending on my settings that you're going to see soon, some of these things might become categories, or they might become sections and subsections and articles. But at a certain point, if this TOC structure were really deep, at a certain point, Zendesk goes, yeah, we don't go any deeper than this. And so these things that are linked in the TOC just become articles, and it's just a long list of them. And so you kind of have your structure up front, but then you lose it at a certain point. So what's all that mean? What I'm trying to tell you is that if you have kind of a high number of levels in your TOC, maybe you want to think about rearranging them so that you have fewer levels, so that you really get a full structure in Zendesk. Otherwise, at a certain point, you're going to kind of lose that. Another thing to keep in mind is that you're going to see that as we publish, Flare is able to create categories and sections and subsections on the fly, based on your TOC. It can do that. Or you can have categories and sections that are already set up on Zendesk, and you just mapping to them. And so if you've got categories and sections already created, you just maybe want to rename things in your Flare TOC so that they match up. It's possible that you even need to create an empty book that isn't linked to anything. These books that I have in here, these are linked to topics, but I could create a new book in here like this, and I'll just call it new book. And then underneath there, maybe I want to add a topic that becomes an article. And so I could have something like that if I didn't want this linked, because there are different rules for what happens when you publish. If you've got a book that isn't linked, that can become either a category or a section. If you've got a book that is linked to a topic, okay, again, that can become a category or section, but also the topics that's linked to it becomes an article. So just know that you can come into your TOC and you can configure it in different ways to match what you want up on your Zendesk account up there in your help center. All right, so that's pretty much it for the category sections and your Flare TOC. Just kind of keep all that in mind. And now we are going to move on and start creating our other files. We already have our TOC. We need to create our destination file and our target. The next thing we want to do is create our destination file. And this is actually where most of the work is done. But the good thing is, once you get it all in place and working the way that you want, you're just kind of done. And then you can publish and republish as you need over time. In my Flare project, to create the destination file, first I want to come over on the left and select Project Organizer. Come up to Destinations, and you can see if I expand it, I've got nothing under it. I could have a separate destination file for each collection of content I want to publish somewhere, whether it's Zendesk or somewhere else. I don't have any, so I'm going to right click here and select Add Destination. Brings up this dialog. I already have a file name down here that I put in before, Zendesk-Austin. You can name yours whatever you want, but I named it this because this lets me know, oh, this destination file is about me publishing to Zendesk, and it's about this Austin content. So I click Add. It adds that file here on the left and opens up this destination editor on the right. Now, I just need to fill this out. And the first thing you got to do is come to the Type dropdown and select MadCap Connect for Zendesk, because there's all these different kinds of destination files, but this is the one we want. All the files then change dynamically in here, and what you do is come up and select Activate. This brings up this wizard where you put in your Zendesk key that you get from MadCap software, and I'm just going to select that and paste this thing in here and click Next, and then you put in your information in here. Oops. Okay, and click Next, and then it finishes. There you go, finish. This button now changes to deactivate. This text changes, and we're on to the next thing. So we're just going to kind of work our way down this editor. The next thing that we need to do is click on Login Credentials, and we need to put in the URL and our email and our password that are associated with this account. Now, this is one place where you could hit a roadblock. This is a browser-based window. And if you click on that and this comes up and it just never, it's just blank, you don't see anything. Probably the reason why this happens is that your company's using a proxy server and things are just kind of locked down and you can't get past it. So that's okay. There's a solution for that. You just close out of this, select File, come down here, select Options. This opens up the options dialog. Lots of tabs on the left. You select proxy server, and then you just complete this information, maybe with help from your system administrator, and then you would click OK. And then I would close Flare altogether, relaunch Flare, start over with your destination file. We're not using a proxy server, so I'm just going to click Cancel out of this. And I can come back in here, login credentials. Now, the next place that it possibly could trip you up, because it has me, is you want to put in your subdomain here. Mine is fictionsoft.zendesk.com. And the reason why I say it could trip you up is because sometimes I get in a hurry and I'll just paste in fictionsoft.zendesk.com all into this white space. But this .zendesk.com is provided over here on the right. So if you do that, it won't work. So all you need is the subdomain. Actually, this is a brand right here. I mentioned before that Zendesk has brands and Flare supports that. So this isn't the main subdomain for our Zendesk account. This is a brand within it. So that's how easy this is. You just put in the brand subdomain there and click next. So I had already put in email and password after that subdomain previously. And so this just kind of finished and says credentials are set. So then we just need to kind of keep going, working our way down the rest of the editor. So as we move down, you can see that the URL is just provided here based on what we put in. And now we need to come down to structural options and start filling this in. Use TOC to define. This is selected by default because most people are probably going to want to do this. What this means is it is going to look at your TOC, the structure in here, and it is going to create categories or sections, or possibly both, depending on your settings in here. It'll create those automatically on the fly up in Zendesk. And so, or it'll map to existing categories and sections that you already have. So if you've already got something, it'll put that information in there. If you don't already have a category or section, it'll create it on the fly based on your TOC. So most people want to use that. Now, if you don't use that, that's okay, but you do need to complete the default category and default section. Let's go back to Zendesk, and you can see I've got 2 categories in here, and each one of these has a section. I'm going to click on my admin guide and come over here, and you can see there's my categories. And Austin in here, I've got a section called Other Austin. That's just I just created that and named it Other Austin. I'll explain why in a little bit. So that is pretty much what you need to have set already up in Zendesk so that you can select these. Whether or not you use this option up here, you need to select a default category, and I want to select Austin, and a default section, and mine's called Other Austin, and so I select that. Now, if you don't choose this use TOC to define, what it's going to do is it's just going to take all of your content that you're publishing, turn them into articles, and it'll put it in this default category and section. That's where it's going to be. But most people probably want to, have this structure, so you select this. That's what I'm going to do in this exercise. I'm going to select that. Now, do I want to create categories and sections? Well, if I go back here to my help center and I look at this, I've got my 2 categories here, San Diego and Austin. Well, I don't really want to create more categories, because what's going to happen if I do is it's going to look at all these things that are at the first level, this topic, this thing that's linked to a topic, and this book that's linked to a topic, and all at the first level. And those are going to turn into categories if I keep this option right here. And maybe that's what you want to do in your case. But in this case, what I want to do is I want to direct everything into this Austin category, the one that already exists. If I have it create new categories, they're all going to be here at the same level. And that just isn't really what I want. I want to put them in here. So come back to Flare and I go, no, I don't want that, but I do want to create sections. So it's going to look at these things that are at the first level. And so introduction will become a section, and things to do and music and so on will become sections. We got this create subsections option here. I'm going to leave this for now and come back to it in a little while. Next, moving on down, we already did the defaults, exclusions. So you see this field in here. This is all about deciding and determining what content you want to not be pushed up to Zendesk. So, and you already get these things that are in place already, default.htm, and these are divided by commas in here, default underscore csh.htm, HTM, and search.htm. And these are in here because, for example, with an HTML5 target, the main entry point into your output is default HTML, but it's not really relevant for when you're pushing things up to Zendesk. And so, you know, this will just prevent that from going up there. And you could click in here and type comma and add other files. For example, I've got the home topic here. Well, the home topic, the idea in this project is that's going to be used for other output, maybe a big full help system or a knowledge base or something that I'm creating and not publishing up to Zendesk, and that's going to be useful there. But I don't really want to include that in Zendesk, so I could add that here. So the exclusions field is one way to exclude content, but it's not the only way. You could also use conditions. So in the project organizer, I can see that under conditional text, I have a condition tag set. And if I open that, I already have some conditions in here. And previously, I created one called Zendesk Hide. And the whole idea here, it doesn't have to be named that. Again, you can name these things anything you want. But the idea here is I could apply this condition to content or even to topic files that I don't want to be included up in Zendesk when I publish. So that's another way that you could exclude things. And there's a third way that I'm going to talk about in a little bit. So that's what that field's for. Come on down. Content options, user visibility. These are things that you can set in Zendesk. You can see that we have some test stuff that we created. And this just this specifies who can view it, who can see the stuff that you're publishing. I'm going to select everyone. Management permissions, again, you set these up on Zendesk. We set up a variety of things here. I'm just going to select admins in this case. And you come down to these checkboxes. Preserve unsafe HTML. Well, Zendesk has certain files that it considers unsafe. And if you open up the help, there's the Flare help, there's actually a link to a Zendesk article that explains this about what they consider unsafe files, maybe videos, things like that. But so if you leave this deselected, it is not going to include those unsafe files. But if you select it, you're going, that's okay. I want to put these up on Zendesk anyway. So you can decide what you want to select there. Now, publish articles. What this is about. There are when we talk about publishing to Zendesk, that's from the Flare perspective. When we say publish from Flare to Zendesk, what we're talking about is actually copying your output files that you generate and moving them up to Zendesk. So you're just moving them from one place to another. That's publishing there. But up on Zendesk, there's another, publish is used in a different way. So you can have your files up on Zendesk, your articles that are in draft mode, and then maybe go through an approval process until you decide, yeah, this is ready for publication, and you publish it. So what we're talking about here isn't the Flare perspective of moving the files. What we're talking about is the Zendesk perspective of, are these things going to start out in draft mode, or are they going to go directly to publish mode? So if you deselect this, they're going to go up into Zendesk and they're going to start out in draft mode. And then you'd have to go into Zendesk and set them individually to or manually to publish. But if you click this, they're going to bypass that draft mode. So when you move this content from Flare up to Zendesk, they're already in publish mode up on Zendesk. Now, under this, there are a few other options that have to do with labels. So Zendesk lets you have labels with articles, and in Flare, you can insert index keywords into topics, you can insert concepts into topics, and if you do that, you could just select these to automatically convert those to labels when the publishing happens up on Zendesk. Now, only HTML5, the HTML5 skinless in this case, supports this. If you're doing clean XHTML, it doesn't support it. In this example, I'm going to be using clean XHTML, so I'm going to keep these deselected. If I selected them, that wouldn't do anything. Delete stale labels. So let's say you use these options and you create these labels up on Zendesk. And then later, maybe you did this based on some concepts, and then you delete a concept in Flare and you republish. Well, the concept's no longer there in Flare, and Flare will, then remove that. It'll that label that had resulted earlier that's no longer relevant. It'll be removed automatically from Zendesk. That's what delete stale labels is about. And then there's also this field down here if you just want to type in some label text that will automatically create labels for all of your content. You can do that down here too. And then finally at the end, there are these fields, view URL. This is really just an internal thing, a shortcut that you can use, you don't have to use. You can see right now it says madcapsoftware.com just as a placeholder. Mine is actually, let me type it in or copy it and paste it into here. Mine is this, it's https fictionsoft.zendesk.com, blah, 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 some other stuff. So you put that in there, and if you click this button, it's just going to open up your browser to that location. So maybe you want to use that if you think, I can't remember what the path is. What was it? I always forget. You can put it in there and then click that and it opens it up. But this could hold anything. You could put ebay.com in here and then click this and it would open up ebay.com. Finally, down at the bottom, there are some fields that have to do with the log files. So when you publish your content up to Zendesk, a log file is automatically created and added up into Zendesk as well. And that's necessary so that Flare knows what to do with all of this content that you're putting up there, where to put it, And so you can't deselect that, but you do have a couple of options down below. Upload only changed files. So if you've previously published from Flare, your content in your project from Flare to Zendesk, and then you make changes to a couple of files and you want to republish, well, selecting this is a good idea because it's going to save you time. It's only going to process the things that have changed. It's just going to leave the things that weren't changed in Flare alone. So it's just going to speed it up. And then remove outdated published files. So that is if you have previously published and then you go back into Flare and maybe you remove a topic and it's no longer relevant, and you republish, it'll automatically remove that from Zendesk. This also reminds me of a couple of other things in that if you do make changes, let's say that you are using something like this categories and sections, or the sections you're mapping, and you had this category or a section that was automatically created. For example, let's say music. I've got this music here at the first level, this book, and this will create a section, in my case, up on Zendesk called music, and it'll put these topics under it. Well, let's say that later I decide, I want to rename this to music stuff, and I republish. Okay, I republish, so a new section will be created called music stuff, and it'll put those topics, those articles underneath that. But that old section that had previously been created called music will just kind of be there by itself, and you'll just need to go into Zendesk and remove that manually. Another thing to keep in mind is if you do happen to have categories and sections already created up on Zendesk and you're just sort of mapping to those, we're going to respect the order that you put things in up on Zendesk. So whatever order it is, we're just going to put the content in there. But if it's new categories and sections that are created as a result of this publishing, then the order is going to follow what you have here in your TOC. Okay, So that pretty much gets us through the creating of the destination file. We're getting closer. We just need to save this and we're done. And then we can move on to the next step of creating our target. We're getting closer. So next thing we want to do is create and edit our target so that we can build and publish our output, push it up to Zendesk. Now, before I get into that, I do want to mention that, okay, that was a lot of settings in the destination file. And if you're still unsure about what you want, what's going to happen, what I would recommend that you do is do some practice publishing, and especially if you've got a sandbox up on Zendesk. So I would go through and I would select different things and publish and go and look, do I want this? And if not, then delete those things and go back and try it again. So that might help you to get to the end result that you want. So now let's go back into Flare and let's set up our target. All right, over on the left side of Flare, in the project organizer, I've got my targets folder, and you can see that I've already got a couple of targets in here. I've got one called All About Austin HTML5 and All About Austin PDF, but I want a separate one. Remember, we want a separate target, destination file, and TOC for each collection. So those other targets will be used for other purposes. And so I'm going to right-click that and select Add Target. And I give it a name. Again, previously I put something in here, so it remembered it's Zendesk Austin. Name it whatever you want. Now, output type over here, I could choose HTML5 as long as I remember in my target to go set that skin on the skin tab to none. I'm not going to use HTML5 in this example, though. I'm going to use clean XHTML. And I click add, and it's going to add that topic over here on the left side of the Flare under the targets folder, and it it opens up the target editor here. So now I just need to go in and do a few things. Targets have a gazillion options in them, and some of them you may use, and a lot of them you may not. I'm going to show you the main things that you need to do, or that you might want to do when publishing to Zendesk. First of all, on the General tab, you want to select your TOC. And if you remember before, I had 2 TOCs already, and then I added one specifically for this purpose called Zendesk Austin, and I'm going to select that. Next thing I'm going to do is if you want to exclude things by conditions, you need to come into your condition text tab. And remember, I've got that Zendesk hide. I haven't applied this condition to any content yet, but I could. And what I want to do is select that and come over here and click exclude. So it's going to exclude things that are that have that condition. It's not going to include those in my Zendesk output. Now, I can, for the moment, I can skip variables, and I'm going to come down to publishing. Because I only have one destination file, you can see it over here on the left, it loads it in here. If I had 20 destination files, they would all be loaded in here. But I just have this one, and I need to decide, do I want to use this destination file to publish things? And yes, I do. So I select publish. Great. Come down here. I'm going to skip these. I'm going to come down to advanced. Now, in advanced, I'm going to scroll down, and there's this field here called content to include. Remember, I talked about ways to exclude content, and one of them was in here in your destination file, this exclusions field. You could do that. You could use conditions, and another way that you could exclude things, include or exclude, is this field right here, content to include. And so there's 3 options. There's all content. You could say, hey, I just want everything. I want everything unless it is excluded by one of those other methods I just mentioned. Or I could come down here and select content linked directly from the TOC. What that means is that Flare will look at your TOC, and the topics that are linked to these nodes in here, and it'll only include these things. So that could be a nice option for you. However, you may not want that, because I'm going to open up this topic right here. This book is linked to a topic. I'm going to open this up, and you're going to see that I just have a little bit of text in here, and I've got a couple of cross references in here. Now, one of these cross-references, the other things, is linked to this topic over here, other things. Now, that topic is nowhere in the TOC. But it is linked from a topic that is in the TOC. So what's that mean? Well, if I were to select this, it would include all of this stuff, but it's not going to include this other things topic, even though it's linked. And what'll happen is it'll strip out this cross-reference, and then you'll just end up with the text. Here are some other things, and that'll be kind of goofy because where are the other things? You can't get to it. So in your target, you may or may not want that one, or you could select this one, content linked directly or indirectly from the target. That's exactly the same thing as I just told you about, except in this case, this topic right here, other things, would be included. Even though it's not in the TOC, it's indirectly included because it's linked from this topic, which is in the TOC. So those are really the main things I wanted to show you. There are, of course, lots of other, settings in the target. But what we want to do is make sure that at least those things are taken care of. Okay, got that set. So the next thing that we want to do is look at building and publishing and seeing how things look. All right, so we have our target. We've got all three of these files. They're all kind of connected together. Now let's get in there and let's build and publish and view some output. So in my target at the top, I'm going to click build. That's going to open up this builds window pane at the bottom. And this is a really tiny project, so it's going to go really fast. You can see it turned green and no warnings or errors or anything. It just worked. And now I can click publish. And publish is going to go a bit longer because there's more that has to happen. And one of the areas where you could possibly experience a problem is here, either in the building or the publishing. This one, the build turned green because everything was fine. It could have turned red and given me an error where it didn't work, or that could happen during the publishing process too. So I'm going to let this run and come back once it's finished and show you what I would do if I hit an error. Okay, so it finished publishing. It was successful. You can tell because it says publish complete here and there's no errors or anything. Now, if I did hit an error where either one of these didn't finish, I would select that row and I'd click open build log. And that's going to open this thing. And there's these three tabs in here. And if there was an error, I see what the text was for that. And sometimes that's enough to let you know, oh yeah, that happened, and go back and fix it and rebuild or republish. If you're not sure from the error message, come in here to messages, and this is just kind of a running log of what happened as things were going, and you go all the way to the bottom, and you can see that this publish was complete. It was successful. But if you hit an error, it's going to let you know at least where things happened. So maybe that's enough information to let you know, oh yeah, this happened and I need to change this. Maybe it's not, but that's okay. The main thing is don't worry about it. Don't freak out. You just contact tech support. It could be that there is a bug. And remember, there's two companies here. This is Zendesk and MadCap software. And so you could have a bug in either place. And so, but the main thing to remember is it always gets sorted out. We'll figure it out. So most of the time, this publishing is going to be successful. But if you do happen to hit a problem with it, just contact us and we'll get it resolved. Okay, so this all finished. It was published. So let's go into Zendesk. So I published all of my stuff into this Austin category. So I'm going to click that, open it up, and here's all the stuff. A few things I want to point out. One is, notice my default section that I had originally, Other Austin, it put this topic, Other Things, under it. That's the topic that wasn't included in the TOC, but it was linked from this topic, this article here, People. And so it put it in my default section. Another thing I want to point out is this section on music. So I've got my section, and then I've got just all these articles all kind of lined up here. But if you go back into the project and look at the TOC, you can see that this music section, this is actually nested books, and these are all linked to topics, but it didn't create this structure. And the reason why is because, again, Zendesk only has a certain number of levels, and it got there and it just kind of put them all lined up. But what I can do is I can come back in here, and remember I didn't select create subsections before. I'm going to select that this time, save that, and we'll come back in a little bit and see what happens there. Another thing to point out is sometimes people will notice you'll open up a topic like introduction, and you'll see introduction, introduction, it's repeated. Well, what's going on here? Well, let's take a look at it. So this section here, introduction all the way down, that's the actual topic. I can come over here on the left and flare and open that, and you can see, okay, there's my H1. I got an H2 right after that, some text, an image, another H2, some more text. Okay, so what happened was Flare lets you have topic titles. This is metadata. And by default, it's going to be the same thing as whatever the first heading level is in here. So you can right click that topic and select properties. And in here you go to topic properties and I'll click off of that. So you can see topic title. There's this gray text that says always use first topic heading. So it did. And that's what's happening here in Zendesk. Flare provided this stuff. And then Zendesk has this section up here where it uses the title. So the title just kind of gets plugged in automatically. But a lot of people don't really like that. I don't really like that. I'd want to change that. So a couple of things that you can do. Number one is you could enter different topic title text in here. And so that would make it different. I'm not going to do that here. I'm going to click cancel, but that would work. The thing is, wherever you want that to happen, you'd have to go into the topic properties and change that. The other thing we could do is we could hide this H1. And if we did that, then you just have, you'd have this thing up here and this thing would be hidden. So let's take a look at that. The way to hide this, again, there's different ways to exclude content, and conditions and styles are usually used. Now, I do have that condition that I created before called Zendesk hide, and I could apply that to this H1. The thing is, whatever I want to hide, I'd have to go into that topic and apply that condition. But I could do something quicker. I could do a combination of styles and conditions. That's what I want to do here, because maybe for all of my content that I'm publishing to Zendesk, I just want to hide all the H1s. I could try that. So let's go into resources. I'm going to open up my style sheet. And in my style sheet, I'm going to come down on the left and select H1. And because that's what I want to hide. And I'm actually going to change this field to show you everything. So there's all the properties, and the properties in the style sheet. I'm in advanced view. That's why it looks the way that it looks. These are all alphabetical, but I could click this and switch to group view so things are more organized. Come all the way down, open up unclassified, and I scroll down, and I start seeing all these properties that start with MC. That's how you know it's specific to Flare. It's special because that stands for MadCap. MC conditions is what I want to find. There it is. Click this, and there's my conditions, and I just select the one that I want to use. Click OK, and save. I come back to my topic, and you can see the condition was automatically applied to that. But I could open up any topic, people. It applied it automatically to that. So it's just a quicker way to do it. All right, so I've applied that. And let's go ahead and build and view again and see what we've got. So let's go back here. I'm going to click build again, and it's going to, again, run through the build pretty quickly. Everything's fine. And I'm going to do publish. And I'm going to let this run, and I'll be back in a moment when it finishes. So it finished publishing. Everything was fine, no errors or anything. So let's go back into Zendesk and check it out. Okay, I'm going to go back into my Austin category. Things look a little different now. This thing is still the same, but introductions just kind of by itself. Things to do, that's kind of by itself. Those are just orphaned there. Music, look at music. Music changed because I added those subsections. So if I click music, you're going to see, oh, there's the subsections. You can go in there and drill down to the articles. But what about these things that were where articles were removed? Well, that had to do with hiding the content. So if you remember in the introduction, I had the H1 and it was immediately followed by an H2. So you can see history down here. This is a new section that was created with this history article. And that was the one we were just looking at. So what happened was we hid introduction and Flare went, okay, so you hid that. So we're just gonna, now that's your first heading and we're gonna use that. So now you kind of back where you were, except different text. You've got this term repeated. So this might be a case where you do go back in there and you do add the topic properties. You change the topic properties to introduction here if you want. So you could do that if you want. But if you look at other topics in here where I didn't have an H2 up there at the front, you open up people. This one shows you that it did work. Before it said people and then people down here. So it did work in that case. So you might need to use a combination of things to get just exactly what you want. So that's how you kind of go through and build and publish, and then you kind of go back to the drawing board and maybe make some changes, republish until you get what you want. The next thing we need to talk about is themes. So why do we need to be concerned with themes? Well, that's because there is certain data, there's certain information in that you need to include in your theme to make it all look and work the way that you want, some CSS and some JavaScript. And fortunately, Flare creates this for you. So there's a couple of ways that you can work with this. Let's take a look. All right, so in Flare, one of the easiest ways to get to this, I already generated and published the output. You can go to the project ribbon and select Open Output Folder, and drag it over here. Here's what happens is it takes you to that location where your output is. And notice that you got this zip file that was automatically created, and it just named it after my stuff, Zendesk Austin.theme.zip. So what you can do is then have that open in Windows, and come in here to Zendesk, and I'm going to go into my guide admin and come over to where themes are, and you can see I've got a theme in here. The default one, Copenhagen, it's set as live. Well, to get that CSS and JavaScript stuff that we need, what you can do is just drag this right in to Zendesk, and it creates this new theme. Finish here in just a moment, and then you can set this to live. And there is your theme. And so it has all of that stuff that you want already inside it. But there are some people that might be thinking, hey, I already have a theme and I already put work into it. I customized it. I don't want to redo all that work. Well, let's go back to where we were with the other theme. So you can get that CSS, that JavaScript stuff into there. So what you do is go into the Flare help system, help.madcapsoftware.com, and just search for Zendesk. And you're going to see this right here. And this is basically the process that we've been going through. And we're all the way down to here, install and modify your Zendesk, install and modify your Zendesk themes. So click on modify. And this topic right here explains how to do it, how to take a theme that you've already got and you edit the code and you get this JavaScript and CSS stuff into it. So it shouldn't take you too long. This walks you all the way through it. So that is themes. Hopefully now that you've seen all of this, you understand some of the things to watch out for. You understand what the different options mean, how to get things set up, and go through trial and error until you get it set just the way that you want. I want to thank you so much for watching this video. Hope it was helpful for you, and we will talk to you next time. Bye.